Whoa.
So yeah, coming on board early is you prefer that then rather than coming on board late. I
If
assume.
time allows, if time
Yeah,
allows, yeah.
yeah.
Because you're even if you're not doing script movies or whatever, you are thinking about it. You are, it's, at any moment you start thinking, oh, okay, because this isn't something you turn off, right? Like if you make things, it's always going, whether you're with your kid or you're with your dog or you're with your whatever, and you're in the middle of an argument and all of a sudden an idea comes, you're like, oh, it's annoying, but it's a very true thing. And I always have my phone voice memo thing going on, and I always, to record any ideas I have, and I'll sing it badly into the phone, but it is a constant thing. So the sooner you're on something, your mind starts to think and starts to imagine and what could it be, and 90% of it doesn't work, but at least you're thinking, you know.
Yeah, and it's worth it then, because you did say before that 30% of the music made it in, for instance, and 70% wouldn't. So you have to be prepared for that. But that's just the cost, right, of being able to run these ideas past the director in plenty of time for them to give their feedback. And I think it's the best way, because there's no point describing what you plan to do. They mightn't understand what instruments you're talking about, or the concepts you're talking about. They just want to hear it and say yes or no. So
Yes, that's absolutely the truth. That is not. I have yet to. I just talked. I'm working on something right now. I hope, if I say employed in it, and then, but I started talking to the director a little bit about the conceptual thing, and I wasn't so sure I should be doing it. Because I do think it's better not to talk about anything. Just write them. And I kind of was like, just to try it, because I want to be open to being wrong about, all of this, about what I say, but I wasn't so sure I should be saying it. I should be talking about the bigger picture. I just think it's better to listen more often than talk. And yes, okay, great. I think I understand. I think I know what to do has been like the default after they've said something that I'm not sure if I understand what to do.
okay,
But
you go
I
away and try something anyway.
yeah, let me try a few options, and let's see, let's so we can get there. We can get there is definitely a key phrase I use. And to speak
Mm-hmm.
about the soft skills or whatever that you mentioned, it's a team effort. So you want to be a cheerleader. I think you want them to feel like, we're in good hands, whether the music's just not working or not, or working, but you want them to feel like, yeah, okay. And then you hang up and freak out, then you disconnect the phone. You're like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do. But you don't want them to see that. I don't think so. I don't think it helps because they have too much pressure from the other departments. VFX, let's say, did a horrible pass at something, or the sound design isn't working and he can't communicate with the sound designer, and then, or she or they, and they meet with you, and then and all of a sudden you're you're like, you also have a problem and you have your drama. You don't understand my personal life, blah blah blah. And they're like, what? They really have very little room for you in this process. And when they give you the attention, I call it the eye of Sauron. It's like you're working and all of a sudden the eyes
It's on
on you,
you.
and yeah, you don't want to fall like Frodo. You want to just present. Okay, great. See you in a week, or see you when you're ready to see the next batch or whatever.
Mm.
And because they do have so many other things that, and again, when your ego's in the way, you think it's all about you, and it's not. Like they're the last thing, they're trying to make time for you. And when they do, it better be as quickly and well presented as possible. So
Mm-hmm. Has it ever happened where you have been presented with a temp score that maybe they have fallen in love with or something, and I've asked you to recreate it as closely as possible? With that can't be a
yeah.
conflict to your creative
Yeah, I
instinct.
as a matter of fact, in the program, I teach at the Frost School, like two of the projects are writing to a temp, at least in the first semester. You have to
Mm.
know how to do that. You can't, that's again the ego thing or the art thing. I
Mm.
mean, if you want to work, work with a specific director and they hire you because of the kind of music you've already established yourself to be a writer of, that's a different story.
Mm.
But for the most part, 80% of the work needs temporary music, and it's a tradition that goes back decades and decades. I think back to Gone with the Wind, where there needed a temporary music to show an audience because
Mm.
there's such a thing as a preview, and the preview kind of dictates the kind of distribution power that's going to be put behind a project. If the preview is bad, they're not going to spend money marketing it.
Mm-hmm.
Why would they? They know it's going to flop. So a preview usually happens before or during the time the composer is getting hired. And when they have the money, they're going to use the temporary music of the composer that they've hired because that composer is well established.
Mm.
If they if they don't have money, they're going to use any temp music they can get their hands on that helps tell the story. And um and then you're going to be stuck with one or two cues throughout that you can't do a single thing about, but make it as close as possible. So you have to learn the skill set. It is part of what we do. It's not,
Mm.
be creative. I've had plenty of students throughout the years now who've complained, to their detriment, I believe, that I can't do that. That's not me. I go, that's great. Okay. You won't work, but go
Mm.
go ahead, be you. You do what you need to be happy, But for the grade, you're gonna flunk the project, And
Oh,
I would always tell students is like if you really feel like it's really messing with you, because it's a hard thing it's a hard pill to swallow, whatever cliche you want to put in there.
mm.
But the truth is, if you want to do that, then do the assignment and then write your own cue for yourself.
Mm.
And if you're hired for a project and you really have an issue with it, do the assignment, do the thing that's close to the temp, without getting into the issues of litigation, which you should look up and learn about.
Mm.
And then write an alternate cue and say, listen, I have two versions. Tell me which one you like.
That
And
does.
you
Yeah.
cannot show up with the non-temp version and
Yeah.
expect it to go well. It will not go well 90% of the time. You
Yeah.
know, you may hit a home run, but that's if I've had so many conversations where like, sorry, we really like the temp here. We don't know what to do, but we really like the temp. You go do the temp and you find a way to make it work within the melodies that you've written, within the themes that you have established for yourself, at least if you've that far along. But I think it is the industry. And to pretend it's not is really the problem, That I
Yeah.
think that's the thing, to ignore it's not a thing, or to not, we don't talk about Bruno, no.
I think that's great that your students have to do that as an assignment, because if they can't even do it for an assignment, or it's troubling their principals, how are they going to work in the real world? It's just the reality.
I do feel that very strongly. I do let them know the difficulty of the class and that it's going to be as real world as possible. And I want them to feel that in a safe environment as opposed to the real world when they're like, oh, it's John Williams is great. He just turned 90. How cool
Mm.
is that music? And then you start writing music that you love and that you feel is good. And they're like, this isn't even right for the movie. And you're
Mm.
like, what do you mean? At least I prepare them to have some calluses, and I
Yeah.
and I think because it's always rough. I still feel horrible. I still feel like my soul is caving in when a cue gets rejected, but I process it differently now. Like I know first of all that I'm going to deliver something else, and so I start working towards that, and I get over it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it takes time. It's easier to say than do. And so I certainly don't feel I've reached a place where it's like, okay, let's do another one. That's what I say, but inside I'm like, man, that was the one. That was the one. You don't understand.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to be as real here because it's sort of it's it's that thing we can't touch. It is the ego. It is that sort of personal, very naked thing we're presenting to the world. It's our most vulnerable thing. It's our creation, right?
Mm.
But you know, not all of them are great. So not all, really, truly, many of them, and we are like the worst. We have a sense of we have our point of view, but then we're wrong half the time. We don't know better. You know what I mean? They
Hmm.
know better. The people who hire us know best, whether they know best or not. They are the ones who are going to decide it.
Yeah,
So
they have the last say. We're not the movie makers, you know.
no, we're
So,
just writing music for their movie, so or
and you
story or whatever.
you mentioned John Williams, and I was going to ask you what, like, first of all, do you think directors are influenced by trends in music, currently versus, and this will come clear, versus say the John Williams or the Corn Gold sort of scores from the 40s and 50s, and then John Williams sort of reanimated it in the late 70s, 80s, the big orchestral scores, with the superhero brass tropes and stuff like that. Do you think that still has a place in contemporary film scoring, or are directors and composers or audiences going towards something different, like whatever, like, so the more genres that are trending, or minimalist scores, or offbeat, quirky sort of scores? Do you think there's a place for both, or are people you work with sort of influenced by modern trends in music?
The answer is yes to all the above. I think you have to be versatile enough to be able to kind of try to address scores that feel like, the old tradition thing, which is what I love anyway. That is sort of like my first and foremost love is the stuff I grew up with as a kid. And the stuff I grew up with as a kid is yesterday was John Williams' birthday. Tomorrow's going to be Jerry Goldsmith's birthday. It's the best week of my life right now, right? As a fan of music and but of film music. But the truth is, like, the most financially successful films are of that 70s 80s tradition. They are Alan Silvestri, Endgame. Michael Giacchino, I believe, for much of it, he's kind of tends to be, he can be the big orchestral composer, and those superhero movies speak that language, I think, for the most part. The big blockbusters. And then I'm thinking of the most money making movies: Avatar, James Horner, Titanic, Horner, things that have made the most money, not just popular, but financial. And the bottom line is a determining factor in anything. You know,
Mm. Mm.
it's what brings them studio money is what they'll hire. They don't care. Any of this other thing is sort of analyzed afterwards. But
Mm. Do you
what
think,
brings go ahead.
yeah, are directors influenced by that? Do you think, like, oh, let's go with the safe score, or let's go with a score that's safe and brings in the
No, no, we're
money?
having conversations. No, I'm speaking objectively of, like, to speak to what is popular now. Well, financially, if you look at just the most popular scores, you'd be thinking of Endgame and Alan Silvestri. So Alan Silvestri is the most, I mean, I'm looking at the amount of money that they've made. Um, but the trends are so varied now. And what is popular on Netflix, let's say, as far as being watched by viewers, it is yes to all the above, as I mentioned. I think, I would hope that a director would never think, let's do what's safe.
Mm-hmm.
you know I would hope that a director that's up and coming and in cinema school, and I think it's the nature of people that are in their teens, 20s, and 30s even, are are have to break with a convention. They can't stand it. They're sick of it. all the all the cinema and the great auteurs that are now very old from the 70s were doing just that. Coppola, Spielberg, De Palma, even Lucas. They were all friends, and they were all like breaking the convention. They couldn't stand the way in which movies were being made by the big studio system. They became the big studio system. And then there's other directors making great films, now that are breaking through and doing all kinds of work. And I think the one truth that it was not maybe prevalent 10 years ago is the amount of content that is out
Mm.
now and being made. So by that, the amount of diversity in styles and likes is become a full rainbow, you know, of choices. And I think that it doesn't. One thing I do know is that I would never advise a student to just, you know, you must get good at orchestral writing and or else you'll never work. That's speaking to the first thing I answered, which is the most money being made. I think that students tend to have, and I think I've noticed a lot in interviews and conversations, that knowing orchestration and knowing the orchestra is kind of the epitome of writing.
Mm.
And I don't think that's true, you know, because that says nothing of Cliff Martinez or Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, and they've done pretty well. And I don't know how much of the orchestra or the range of the oboe they care to know or speak of. And and so, excuse me. So I think it's good to develop your skill set. If you're a synth composer, you should just become the best synthesizer composer around. If you know what I mean, like whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is that you. However, it doesn't hurt to learn the orchestra. It doesn't learn to hurt the ranges of the instruments, and it doesn't learn how to write for it. But I'm saying that if you can't write for orchestra, you're not valid is something I would never, you know, want to talk about or preach or support. I think there's value in all kinds of genres of film scoring and media writing, and there's plenty of things that I suck at, you know, that, and there's things that I'm working on getting better at, and you know what I mean. So
Mm.
I don't know if I've even answered your question. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, no, no, yeah, for sure. And actually, yeah, one of the last things I wanted to talk about was how technology has influenced workflows since you've been in the business. For instance, there's so many sample libraries out now. So if someone did want to write for orchestra, I'm sure your students are probably all using them anyway, and even working composers use them. And so, do you think there's a danger that we're all using these? I don't know how many different sample packs there are, but there's say maybe 10, you know, top of the range legitimate ones. If everyone is using them, is there a risk that film scores will start to sound generic and sort of the same because we're using the same sounds?
Many do, you know, but many have. You know, trends are trends. To speak to the part B of the other question you'd asked, is sort of like,
Yeah.
you know, at least in the 80s, when the synthesizer became affordable and available to many people, there were a ton of synth scores that came out. You know, if you try and watch a movie called Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or
I've
many of the John
heard.
Hughes films that were from that time, that and listen to the score. It's like it's funny how it's dated in a way, much like, you know, the scoring style of some of the great composers of our times. You know, the 50s had a kind of over dramatic, over the top approach, you know, and they just styles that wouldn't serve today. You
Mm.
know, at the University of Miami in the 40s and 50s, you know, most of the people that were graduating from the brass, you know, from trumpet and jazz, no, jazz wasn't established yet, but people that were playing trombone and, you know, into the early 60s, they were working all the time because there were, you know, big bands all over the country and in Miami Beach, and employment was kind of given to them because there was so much of a kind of music, you know, that was being requested by the market. And I think now we have the amount of content available with all kinds of music that's out there. um there is a kind of music, there's a lot of people that get really good at writing for music for libraries, and if they're entrepreneurial enough and they see it as the business it can be, they get to writing and making those and
Mm.
contributing and finding a way to kind of sell their wares or peddle their wares, if you will, you know, to getting things placed. And there's nothing wrong. I think that's great. It's a business. It is the music business. You know, it's the film industry. You know, it's not the music art or the
Mm-hmm.
film art, you know, that you're getting into. So I don't even know if I've totally deviated from what you said. Again, I'm so sorry.
No, it's
What did
fine.
you ask?
Well, do you think, first of all, that there's a risk that film scores will start sounding generic and similar if we're all using the same sample packs? And maybe how could that be avoided if you have a thought on
Yeah,
that?
no, they will. Thank you, because I figured I went away. I'm just, I don't know. I think it's a lack of coffee. I'm only like drinking water, so I apologize.
Oh,
So,
man.
I would say that, yeah, there's always going to be a sort of middle ground where music, sounds like, you know, they'll say, Zimmer like or whatever like, but Zimmer established a trend that was very much his own language that people tended to follow. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's amazing. It's like one of the most important composers of our time. And probably, which because of I don't understand why he really understands how to write to picture. And that's a skill set that has nothing to do with orchestral knowledge or anything. It just has to do with storytelling and understanding how to tell a story. And before I go off on that, let me go back to the question, which is, there is no danger. I think there's never a danger. What's going to happen is there's going to be plenty of people that sound like everybody else. And there's going to be always a few people that sound like themselves that break through. And there's going to be plenty of people that sounds like themselves that don't break through. And unfortunately, that's life. It has nothing to do. Life is not a fair thing. It sort of just happens at us. And we hope to do and earn our positions and our possibilities and make realities happen and push towards the dream. But if it doesn't necessarily work out, you can't really help it. And
Hmm.
so at the same time, as far as making music, there's going to be people that really want to have their own voice, but don't necessarily find it, but are employed. There's plenty of very well financially established composers and very well respected composers whose melodies you cannot, let's say, recall on the spot, whose films you've seen. There's a few, of course, like Williams and many and a few more who have melodies that are just, they have a gift. They've really, or at least worked and developed that gift to a point where it's kind of incredible. Um, and there are people who have voices like Cliff Martinez. That's another one. I just think of the scores that he's made and how he found his way through to make stuff. I love, like, I'm a huge fan of Natalie Holt's work now, and I love how she kind of blends synthesizers and orchestra and just, everything about what she's doing is, I'm like a stupid fan.
Mm.
To me,
Yeah.
that is a voice. It immediately established itself. Yet there's so many of the elements. I'm like, oh, I could have done that. I could, you know what I mean? But you didn't.
Hmm. Hmm.
You didn't
Hmm.
come up with that. You didn't. You really didn't see that one through. And there's something about how many composers, everyone has their own voice. And going back to the thing I said to you, we have the same scene to score. I will score it, and it will be me, and you score, and it will be you. Period. And if we have 100 people score it, as in the QTube competition, there's
Yeah.
going to be 100 versions of
Mm.
of the same scene. And to me, that's a miracle. I think that's beautiful. I think that's amazing. Now, level wise, it's up to ultimately a subjective thing. What I think is great, you may think is horrible, you
Mm.
know? Even if we're looking at it from a point of view of, oh, the craft, they understand the story, they're working to the story. Even within that, there's going to be things that you feel are better, that I feel are, it's a subjective thing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, I'm never worried about anything dangerous happening or the end of, skill sets as we know it. I think there's so much out there, and there are so many people writing with so much talent that this is only doing this over time. I do think so.
Yeah. And you don't think originality is being compromised or people are getting lazy or
No,
anything
I,
like
I
that?
think there are going to be lazy people 1,000 years from now. I think
Mm.
there's going to be people who aren't original 1,000 years from now. I also will share this, is like I had when I was doing theory stuff, like in, my God, this is like 99. I was a TA at the University of Southern California, a teaching assistant. I was doing music theory or, and for, and this, and I was doing, music theory class. So I was talking, and I had a student that raised their hand, and they're like, this is I'm a very creative person, and I write, and I don't know where I write, where my writing comes from. I don't know where uh, the things that I do happen. Very honest. They were being honest. They weren't being pedantic, They were being honest and real. And they were concerned. They were like, I feel like learning all these rules is going to take away that originality, that gift I have, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And because I really feel like I'd rather not know certain things, because then it'll take away the magic.
Yeah.
And I think it's a valid argument, but at the same time, the counter argument, and what I told her was, I think that there's really nothing wrong with you having more tools in the tool set. You learning the rules isn't something for you to write using them. It's something you go to when you're stuck. If you're creative, no one's going to take that creativity away. No one's really, with the rules of theory and music composition, they aren't really, depends on where you go, I guess. But if you're just learning how to get better at writing, and learning where notes tend to go, or at least a practice, or what's known as the common practice era music rules were, learning counterpoint, learning imitation, you're really just opening your tool set. I don't know why I'm stuck on the word tool set. I used to like a band called Tool, but whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
you're opening this set to much more variety. When I write, I'm not thinking theory. I'm just going where my hands want to
Instinct.
go, where I'm singing, and I do it. And then I'll like, okay, wait, do I have parallel fifths? Oh yeah, maybe I could fix this voicing a little better. It's a revisionist kind of thing. Or even the most basic, I have these chords, I've done these 3 chords, and wait, what chords haven't I done? What songs do this that are very similar? Where can I go? Oh wait, theoretically I could substitute this chord, or I can actually use a secondary dominant, or if you're stuck.
Yeah.
Until then, should you invoke, the lack of originality, or the lack of, there's nothing. There are people who are going to sound very, average, or whatever you want to call it, because the way you're asking the question.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, hopefully there'll be plenty of employment for people who actually are good at what they do and know how to tell story. And some of it may sound like other things. Very few people, I think, get the privilege of being around for as long as people like Silvestri, or Williams have been, or Cliff Martinez for that matter. I think I think I don't think that should be an expectation in one's career. I think one should be happy to work while they're working, and do
Mm-hmm.
the best they can, and move on.
Yeah. Wonderful. Wow. Well, we've been talking for an hour, so I really enjoyed it. Carlos, thank you.
Same here. If there's any other one last question, I'm happy to answer. If you didn't get to ask it, I'm super, super happy to do it.
Oh,
If
you're
you're
you're so kind. Well, it was I think I touched on pretty much all the important parts I wanted to ask you about, actually. Just okay, can you think of any non-traditional methods of composition that you or other composers are using? Interpret that any way you like, non-traditional
I
methods.
I do sing into the phone. I sing into the phone while watching a picture, while watching an image, and I'll be like, as I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, they have SEMT code usually burned on it. So I'll be like 24, 25, 26. And the reason why I do that is, and then I'll start like, da 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 da, da 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 da, and then I bring that audio file into the computer, into the DAW, and 24, 25, I'll match with the SEMT time code. And now I have my da 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 matching picture as I sang it. And then
Mm.
I'll go underneath that and put a piano roll, and start finding do 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 da da
Yeah.
da. You know
Yeah.
that that's
Wow.
one way that I don't know. It's
Nice.
very conventional, but
That's
and it's
great.
using technology to kind of, in a way that probably wouldn't be used before.
Yes. Yeah, that wouldn't have been available 20 years ago or
No,
whatever.
certainly not.
Yeah. Or
Not with that facility. You know
Mm,
what I mean?
mm,
It immediately goes and it connects to my computer, and it's in the DAW that I'm looking at right now within a second,
mm,
and it makes it very effective. And the one thing I do also is I do when I get something, a scene that I'm not necessarily doing the singing to, and I have to play to, which I'm bad at piano, but I can play chords or whatever, and then I will loop it like 30 times, and the scene that I have to score, and then I'll just loop a click track, like it's just looping, and then I'll play and I'll play, and then the second time, third time, fourth. By the 10th time, I notice I keep doing one thing in one area and one thing like a little bit after, like 20 seconds in and then a minute in. And then I keep doing that. And then by the 20th loop, I'm having like three or four or five things that I'm doing in the same places. And then by the 30th time, I kind of have a bit of a cue. So I'll
mm,
stop, and then I'll start tempo mapping what it is I'm doing. And
mhm.
then the cue is really born, but it's born out of a loop. You know what I mean? Out of me doing the same scene, and sort of, it's almost like you're molding or sculpting or whatever you want to call it, the
Yeah.
scene.
And the good stuff sticks,
Yeah, the good
with
stuff,
each loop. Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you have your 5 or 6, and then the whole minute long cue. And that's the other thing. Cues are usually short by nature. It's not
Hmm.
often that you have a 6-minute cue. Usually you'll have 30 seconds, a minute, 10, two
Mm.
minutes maybe. So it's always, encouraging when you have, oh, I have so much to write. Well, you just have, really 30 seconds you got to worry about right now. Why don't you just do that? So
Right.
it's an encouraging thing.
Yes. You don't have to start with the opening credits music, like the main theme or the closing credits,
Yeah,
that comes
you
after.
if you have the time, you certainly do want to start thinking about it and
Mm,
futzing with that, and messing around and coming up with ideas. And I tend to actually go for if I know they're hard scenes, those are the ones I'll try to do if I have access to them. And
mm,
just to start in the worst part of it, so everything else feels like it's downhill, or hopefully uphill, or better
mhm.
downhill. And
Yeah.
that's a tendency I tend to do. So,
Yeah.
if it helps anybody.
Amazing. Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you. Thank you so much. This has been fun, and I'm glad we were able to coordinate, and
Yeah. The time
really
zones and everything and your free time. It's really great. Thank you.
fun to be continued. I'm really grateful that Brian set us up, and I really wish you luck in everything, and good luck with the baby. Good luck with sleep.
Thank
It's
you.
so hard, it's so hard, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train. I promise.
Sleep will come back again, will it? At
It
some
will.
point.
It will. It will come back, and there's nothing like it. And I usually tell people that having kids is babies, is 5% awesome, and then they get really upset. They're like, "How dare you say that?" But the truth is, 95% of the time, you're just trying to get through the day and changing them, and why are they crying, and trying to understand and decipher. And then 5% of the time, they'll look at you, and you're like, "Ah,"
Hmm.
like everything makes sense.
It's all worth it. Yeah.
It is all worth it. But if you're involved in raising the kids, then it's 95% work, and very little breaks. So but it always gets better. We're built somehow to deal with it. There's nothing unique about it. We've all, done it or been through it or will go
Yeah.
through it. And if, as long as you have a support system, whether it's friends or family that you can reach out to, there's nothing like it. So
Yeah. 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 I
thank you.
do. I'm lucky.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing your work when it's your next thing when it's out. I'll be looking out for it.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. And it's really, really great to talk to you, and have a good one.